Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Hello, listener. I am so excited today. I have another best friend with me. Courtney is joining us today, and I love the topic, Courtney. It's like one of the reasons I like begging you to come play with us is, inviting that mindfulness, that well-being into our daily lives. I can be mindful at times, but it's not something that's natural for all the time yet. It's something I work on. So Courtney, help me to make it more of a natural thing for me to have this beautiful mindfulness and my well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I was thinking about how would I start, and I wanted to give just a little bit of history of how I came into this being the primary work that I do. About 5 years ago, I started a coaching practice, working with folks around the idea of self-care. And I was working from a framework of holistic self-care. And the framework I used had sort of 5 major components: physical, social, career or intellectual, emotional or psychological, and spiritual. And so that was the foundation of my practice. And I launched that in 2018. And then in 2020, the world tipped sideways on its axis. And talking to people about self-care, and I used air quotes for anybody that is listening and not viewing, it became, I don't know, it just seemed sort of ludicrous to be telling people in the middle of a pandemic and social uprising and all of the things that we were experiencing to practice self-care. It's been very commodified. It's very hashtag Instagram friendly. And I find that a lot of times when people start thinking about self-care, they start thinking about things like pedicures and manicures and cocktails and sitting on a beach somewhere. And to your point, sometimes that's a really hard thing to do in everyday life, right? So those sort of episodic things that we can engage with can feel great. A massage can feel really wonderful, but that's not an everyday thing. And what do we do when the crises that we're facing, the stressors we're facing, or the challenges we're facing are so pervasive and everyday that these, sort of episodic one-off activities that we call self-care can't be engaged with regularly? I also realized that I couldn't coach or counsel people out of the pain of a global pandemic or national uprisings. And so that also began to feel a little bit ludicrous, because we can't make those things go away. They're so outside of our control.
Right.
And I really want to focus on people having agency. And so I shifted just very slightly away from hashtag self-care into a Maslowian framework. And so when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about the hierarchy of needs as described by Abraham Maslow, that looks at, we have to lay a foundation where our most basic biological needs are being met, and that we travel up through this pyramid-shaped hierarchy in order to achieve our most whole and complete self, what some people would maybe describe as happiness. I call it wholeness and completion, just really being a complete entity of our own. By looking at it through that lens, it helps open up the door to, well, do I need a pedicure? Or do I need to eat in a way that my body feels nourished? Do I need to be properly hydrated? Do I need sleep? Do I need a safe home? Do I need a career that feels fulfilling? So now we start to move up that hierarchy in a different way. And those do become our everyday life encounters. They're not anymore just this extra thing that you go do and call it self-care. It really is about creating a life that feeds you and fulfills you.
I really love this because I have a really hard time with self-care being so publicized as, I call it self-beautification for other people's pleasure. Yeah. Like, I am going to go get my eyelashes done. So I have these beautiful eyelashes for you, but they drive me nuts. Okay. So I don't wear them because they drive me nuts. But those are self-beautification. But self-care comes from the inside. It's in our hearts. It's in our minds. It's how we nourish ourselves. It's what we do internally. It's how we respond to those external triggers, such as pandemic, such as, and so that to me is when I can fix that inside. I got it. I can help anybody now because I am in line. I don't have to have beautiful long nails to help somebody.
Right.
It's, so I want my strength to grow through self-care. So I love your approach because it's just like I think.
Yes, that's wonderful. I also think it helps people frame how they can do this in everyday life. So I do want to talk about the mindfulness piece in a minute, but when we look through the lens of Maslow, a lot of it is very concrete and tangible. So again, it's, if you look, the very basis of the hierarchy is physiological needs: rest, food, water. Let's start there. Those are sometimes easier things to tackle when thinking about how am I taking care of myself versus #self-care. And I think that can be a helpful, just a shift in that perspective, so that we can start asking, how am I meeting my needs? How am I caring for myself? And those can often be very tangible things that we can see, we can do, and that we engage with more regularly.
And so they're appropriate all the time. Like
we never not need that.
Always need that foundation. You always need nutrition. You always need that health and wellness portion. So why do we always put that on the back burner of self-care? We just put on a pretty face and cover up what's all the other stuff.
So I have some theories about that, and they're largely societal. I think that I do believe that there's sort of they're almost like competing messages, and in the way they compete, they mess with us, I think. And that is this idea of, there's messaging of we should be happy all the time. We should be glossy and shiny and happy all the time. And that is embedded in all of our commercials, advertisements, television, movies. All of it is very glossy. And the end game of that is, if you're not happy all the time, I have something I can sell you that will make you feel happier.
Or make you look happy, whether you're on that way or not.
You'll get that shiny veneer that the world is trying to tell you is sort of the pinnacle of what we are supposed to be working for. I was just teaching class. I teach graduate level counseling students, and we had class today. And one of the things we were talking about today was goal setting. And I was, telling them that often you'll have clients who will come in and they'll tell you that their goal is to be happy. What does that even mean? And
it's different for everyone.
Right. And so often the metrics that we use to define happiness are metrics that are not ours, that they are societal. It's very often embedded in productivity, in what can you offer? Do you align with these, photoshopped images that we see on social media and in advertisements? And all of that, I think, sets up a worldview that's not attainable. And so when I work with clients, I want to say, well, what if the goal is to be whole and not happy? What if the goal is to be healthy and balanced and not necessarily happy? Because I think that the richness of life is in experiencing everything. And sometimes that's going to mean pain and grief and challenges. But coming back to the hierarchy, we have these things we can tap into that will allow us to cope with those challenges so that they don't take over and suck all of the joy and the goodness out of our lives. Maybe that's happiness.
I've thought about this a lot, because one time I told my my family, I want to be more fun.
Mm.
And they're like, Mom, you are fun. I went, no, I'm not. I don't feel fun. And who is to say what fun is? Fun to me is different than fun to you. I want, and it's the same with this self-care. I want to love myself so much that what you think doesn't matter to me anymore.
Right.
Like I told somebody, if I was to tell you, George, you're ugly, what would you think? And you go, I think you're crazy. And I go, you're right. Because you know you're not ugly. You feel it. But if I said, George, you're coming across really weird, all of a sudden you think, oh, maybe I am. So you start rethinking of how do I change me? And that is that bully in our head of, oh, somebody thinks I'm being weird. But if you knew you weren't, it wouldn't matter. Like, she doesn't matter. So it really, when we really, truly love ourselves, you are happy. But that doesn't take away the days that you said, the pain, the sorrow, the suffering, because without them, happiness is boring. You wouldn't ever feel happy anymore. If you never had another emotion, you would not be happy. It's when you have experienced the opposite that and we get constant reminders of that opposite so that we know that it's okay. And then the crazy thing is the only thing we want to show you on Facebook is all the happy, shiny moments. And that's why everybody wonders, well, I'm not happy. I'm not doing these things because I'm not showing you. Well, some of us don't care if we show you our bad sides too, but you don't see them all. You don't see the moment when I'm sitting on my couch going, I really don't feel like going and exercising today. I really don't want to do this. I show you the, hey, look, I did it.
You don't show the fight to get there.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that makes me think of that I'd love to just kind of mention. The first, that point of sort of knowing who you are so that you're maybe more impervious, if not completely impervious to other people's thoughts about who you are, is the pinnacle of the hierarchy, which is this idea of self-actualization. And I always describe that as being so complete and at home within yourself that those other perceptions really don't matter because you have that inner wholeness and that balance of knowing who you are. And that sometimes it's awesome and sometimes it's less awesome, but that it's all worthy all the time. And that there's an inherent goodness embedded in that all the time that never changes. But then also to your point about, we don't have a full spectrum of emotion if we're only focusing on being happy. And I tell clients all the time, you can't self-select out of emotions because we do that through numbing, through distracting ourselves, through paying more attention to our devices or utilizing substances or, being hyperactive and overly busy and scheduling ourselves, almost to death. And we do that so we don't have to feel the so-called bad feelings, the negative feelings. But then the problem with that is I do think it diminishes our capacity to feel any feelings. And then you find yourself just sleepwalking through your life and you're not sure how you got there. And I think it is that aversion to, well, I don't want to feel the bad thing. I don't want to feel the hard thing. I think that also aligns with what we were talking about before with we're supposed to be happy all the time. And so if I'm not happy all the time, there must be something wrong with me. And so we want to avoid that feeling, that negative feeling of, oh, gosh, I feel sad right now. The whole world is telling me I should be happy all the time. And so what's wrong with me that I feel this sadness? Instead of being able to just stand in some equanimity and say, all right, today I feel sad. What might I need? And how might I take good care of myself through this hard feeling?
And all that takes me back to nature.
Yes.
Nature is this amazing example of everything. And it's through the droughts that the roots grow deeper. It's through the rain that moisturizes and cleanses the air and the soil. It's through the thunder and lightning that purifies the air. And it's the sunny days that we love and cherish. But without all the other weather days, we would not have food. We would not have all these things we take advantage of. And why do we think we have to be sunny all the time? Because we were told, smile, so everybody likes you. If you're not smiling happy, nobody will like you. You'll get kicked out of the pack. You're going to die. You need people to not die. I mean, okay, that wasn't all the words, but
it's the implication.
It's that same thing as if I get kicked out of the pack, I can't survive. And so I've got to do everything I can to be in the pack.
That's
what
right.
we didn't get taught was when you're authentic to you, that tribe, that pack, those people that fit with you will be there.
Yeah.
It's okay that the others aren't, because we're all on different paths. We all have different goals. We all have different things, and we don't need to please everybody. So the sun is always shining no matter what. The clouds get in the way. We turn our backs to it and it becomes night, but the sun never stops shining, and your soul will always shine. We just have cloudy days. We have rainy days. We have days that help feed us so that we can enjoy the sunshiny times.
That's right. And that's where mindfulness comes in my mind. So, at the very beginning, you had emphasized the mindfulness of mindful well-being. And I really love the concept of mindfulness as a way to be paying attention to this, right? And to help grow that sense of equanimity, that sense of balance of, okay, it's cloudy right now, but I can be aware of the fact that it's not going to be cloudy forever. And I can let this just come and go as it needs to without trying to manipulate it, without trying to control it. I can just surrender to it. And I think we learn that through mindfulness practice. And I do always like to take a pause here, because I think people get meditation and mindfulness a little bit confused. And so I like to clarify for our listener who is wondering about the difference between meditation and mindfulness. To me, the goal is mindfulness and the tool is meditation. And so people ask me how they're related, or they'll use them as synonyms sometimes. And I always say that meditation is the path to mindful living. I like to just break down a couple myths. First being the myth that meditation is about breathing, because it's not. The breathing is a tool. It gives us a place to anchor our thoughts, and it helps us connect with our body. But anybody can sit on a cushion and breathe for an hour, and that is not going to change their life. I also like to dispel the myth that meditation means emptying your mind. Because usually when I talk to folks, I say, do you meditate? And they're like, oh, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind. And I say that you're not supposed to. Your brain is a thinking structure. That is its whole job. It's not going to stop doing that just because you want it to. I love this teaching by John Kabat-Zinn, who brought mindfulness meditation into the field of psychology through the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And he talks about our thoughts as clouds or birds crossing the blue sky, that our conscious awareness is the sky. Our thoughts are just a cloud or a bird. And that if we're outside, right, and we see a bird fly across the vista, we just say, oh, there's a bird. We don't say, oh my God, what's that bird doing there? Why is that bird still here? Why is it in my sky? We just say, oh, there's a bird. And then we let it fly away. And that I love that as a teaching tool for what mindfulness is to me, which is just letting the bird fly by. And if it's a thought of, oh, this feeling is really hard. Okay. I see that. I see that thought. I see that pain. And I'm just going to let it exist. I'm not going to try to control it or fight it or manipulate it. I'm just going to let it be, because it will pass. Everything always does.
I love it, because that is what meditation is all about. And people think it's just sitting in a chair cross-legged and doing nothing else. But you can meditate on a nature walk. You can meditate doing journaling. You can meditate dancing. You can be present, standing in the grocery store line waiting to check out. You can be present and allow life to happen anywhere. But the reason we meditate is the same reason we go to the gym. You got to exercise that muscle so that when it is needed, it happens.
That's right.
And so when you hit that stressful moment, you know exactly how to allow it, because we have to allow and understand before you can change.
Yeah, that's exactly accurate. Yeah. And I always say anybody can, actually what I will often say is any fool can sit there with their eyes closed, taking what you learn in that practice and applying it to your life, right? So if you're sitting in a meditation practice, so also, side note, one of the things I love about meditation, I've struggled my whole life with perfectionism, and meditation is not a practice that you can perfect at all, not ever, because your brain is going to do what your brain is going to do. Your body is going to feel good sitting one day and your back is going to hurt another day, or you're going to get an itch on the tip of your nose, or you're going to have a humming in your ear, or somebody's going to be, doing road work outside of your house, and you're going to have all these distractions. And so, mindfulness meditation practice has really allowed me to release a lot of my perfectionism, because I'm like, oh, well, I still did it. And maybe it didn't look like an austere monk, sitting on the mountainside, but I showed up and I did it. And I think that that's a tremendous value. And to me, it's about that. It's about sitting in that practice, letting the practice show up how it will, flawed as it might be, still recognizing the inherent goodness in it, and then applying those lessons to your life. Yeah. Because that is, to me, what mindfulness is, to be able to stand in a crowded grocery store with a long line and just say, okay, I'm just going to stand here till I'm not standing here anymore, because that is the truth of the moment.
And that is what mindfulness is.
Yes.
And so it is really that balance of allowing life to be what it is right now, and understanding that it's for our good, even if it feels awful, because you're growing, you're strengthening, you're using those muscles. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get a word from our sponsor. When we come back, I really want to dive down a little bit further into this mindfulness, because it is something that is misunderstood. So we'll be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Lara Jane Coaching. You know you're ready to silence your inner bully voice. Let Lara Jane support you with coaching. To schedule an introduction call, go to larajanelayton.com.
Welcome back. This is kind of fun. Okay, I love it. It's not just kind of fun, but this mindfulness is so critical for a peaceful life. You don't have to be mindful if you like the chaos, if you like the client, if you don't ever want to feel like you're progressing, go ahead, let it go. But if you deal with stress, if you deal with a partner that is frustrating to you, or you have a hard time dealing with service workers that aren't doing what you would do. These are all things that mindfulness can help us allow and adjust to. And so I really want to dig into that. Now I've started my meditation, Courtney. I'm learning to let the bird fly by and say hi, goodbye, and not hold on to him or try to cage him. I'm learning to enjoy the clouds and the shadows and the stuff that they give, and just let them be and not be mad at them that they're in the way of me seeing my sunshine. So here I'm meditating. How can I hone that to use it when I'm not meditating?
Right. So one of the things that I think mindfulness offers us is what I refer to as the pause. So very often we're moving through the world and something happens, call that a stimulus, and then we have a reaction. And I like to differentiate between reaction and response.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times our reactions are habitual. There's neurological evidence to support that we tend to travel down the same neural pathways, the same learned responses. And the more we do it, the more deeply entrenched those responses become. They become habitual. We don't even recognize they're happening. It's an automatic thought response. Meditation, by letting the bird thought fly by and not reacting to it, we learn the skill in our seated practice of just letting a thing exist as it is and being able to just not judge it, not evaluate it, not label it, to just say, that's a thought. Not, oh my God, this is the worst thought I've ever had. Why is this happening to me? But just to say, that was a thought, and to let it go. And so we can then begin to do that same thing in our real lives off the cushion, because we can now take our mindfulness practice and let that grow the space between the thing that happens and our response to it. So now we can actually maybe reduce our judgments, maybe reduce our snap evaluations of circumstances as they present themselves to us. And we can thoughtfully contemplate, how do I want to respond to this? Do I even need to respond to this? And so we can really start to grow that into everyday life in ways that I think can be really, really powerful. And then when we look at where we started with, looking at sort of our well-being, it allows us to connect those external circumstances with how we feel and how we're doing, using a general term. So, if we start to notice that we're really irritable, we're really stressed, there's a lot of tension in our body. If we're mindful, we can start to pay attention to what are the external triggers that are causing this reaction in me. And then we can maybe become planful in, is there a change that needs to be made? Do I start to notice that I'm more irritable if I've only slept 6 hours instead of 8? Do I start to notice that my irritability is worse if I'm inadequately nourished? I've only had one meal all day. Maybe now I'm noticing that I'm snapping at people in a way I wouldn't. The mindfulness helps us notice, pay attention to the truth of our situations, so that then we can think about how we would want to respond. And so maybe we realize that I'm great until I go to work. And then I become extremely irritable. I'm very frustrated. I'm very tense. My shoulders are up in my earlobes. I've got back pain, headaches, whatever. So you start to say, well, maybe I'm not in the right career. Maybe this particular job isn't the right fit for me. Or maybe it's just, I love what I'm doing. I recognize it's high stress, high demand, and I just need to bring in some more coping skills so that I can balance that out a little bit, fill that cup back up. But whatever path that leads us to, I think we recognize both the presence of a concern and the pathway through it by employing mindfulness in those ways. We can just start to notice, just pay attention and become more aware of what's happening in our minds, bodies, and feelings as we're traveling through our everyday.
And you talk about that, and I think I went through life turning off the signals. I don't want to hear from you, body. I don't want to hear from you, brain. I walked through many years very numb. I had a happy family, a good career, all these things, but I was numb. I wasn't feeling it. Sure, I got stressed. I numbed it. But I turned those things off. And one of the things that I've been working on for a handful of years is turning them back on and trying to be aware. And in a sense, I've learned I'm crankier, but it's because I'm paying attention to what is triggering me, and I'm noticing the trigger instead of not being triggered at all. Like before, I just had that thing just shut off, and I went through life as a robot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us do that. And I had a successful career. I had a successful family. They're happy. You look at them now and you go, you did good.
Mm-hmm.
The robot did good. The daycare did good.
Mm-hmm.
I am now learning me.
Mm-hmm.
And that has taken a lot of that mindful practice to start tuning into who is Lara Jane and why. I know that it's the shoulds that trigger me. Oh,
Yes.
Everybody should be kinder. No, it doesn't matter. Everybody doesn't need to be kinder. I need to respond different. Right. Everybody should, I got to quit shooting everybody else.
Yes. Well, Albert Ellis used to say, stop shooting all over yourself. So Albert Ellis was one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
His branch was specifically called rational emotive behavior therapy. And it's a therapeutic intervention that looks at that stimulus response, that a thing happens and we respond. And he had identified should statements, must statements. He called it masturbation. So I must be liked and approved of. Things must go the way that I want them to go. I must be successful in everything that I try. And so he really believed that it was those shoulds and those musts that got us into trouble. Because then we wanted to control the situation and we couldn't just roll with what was true. We couldn't allow space for a misstep and to be able to then approach it with some curiosity and wonder, well, that didn't go great. What can I learn from it? And so I think, we have tools to be able to get out of those shoulds. And that's probably a wise thing to try to do.
And mindfulness is the key here.
Yeah.
Because it's recognizing the trigger, allowing the trigger, because you're not going to change, or you call it stimulus. You're not going to change that external thing coming into you.
Right.
Give yourself the count of whatever it takes, 2, 3, 10, whatever, to do a response instead of a reaction. 100%. And I do, my husband knows when I am getting that edge of, I'm holding my reaction.
Well, and I would say pair with that counting a couple deep diaphragmatic breaths. So deep breaths into the belly that engage the diaphragm. I don't want to go down. I could go into a whole other conversation about nervous system response. That's a whole episode all by itself. But sometimes
you're coming back then, girl.
I always tell people when I went to grad school to become a counselor, I was very much on the CBT train. I was like cognitive behavioral therapy all the way. Now in this iteration of my career, I do coaching and I find I'm blending mindfulness, which has a lot of CBT type theory in it, or maybe because mindfulness came first, maybe we'll say CBT has a lot of mindfulness embedded in it. But I use a lot of mindfulness and then nervous system psychoeducation in the work that I do, because I do think we become activated. And I don't know anymore, as I've grown as a clinician, I don't know anymore that I think that activation is purely our cognitions and the stories that we tell ourselves about a particular situation. I do think there's a nervous system response. And so take your count, whatever it is, 1 to 100, however long you need to count in order to get to that response state. But also maybe pair that with 3 deep breaths deep into the belly so that you're activating the diaphragm, because that's going to help turn off your fight or flight response. And so many of those stimuli that we're talking about are actually going to activate a fight or flight response. I would say our nervous system is really good at its job, which is to keep us alive. That is 100% what our nervous system is there to do. Really, really good at it. Very dumb. Does not understand the difference between, somebody cutting in line at the grocery store and being chased through the woods by a bear.
Well, it's really primitive.
Yes.
These whole things were put in us before we had cars and computers and all these other types of stimulus.
Right.
And so when it was time to run, you wanted to run. You didn't want
ran.
anything to second guess it. You wanted that reaction.
That's right.
Run. Now we have things that look scary like a bear that don't need to be ran away from.
And that is scary.
That is that balance between our primitive response, fight, flight, or freeze. I'm a freezer. I just I don't know what else to do. But I love the way you're framing it in being able to be more mindful. And it's probably the reason my husband does recognize it is because I stop and breathe before I say another thing. It's like, shut your mouth, girl.
One of the things I would add to your recognition of, we had a nervous system before we had all of our fancy technology and life luxuries. We had a nervous system, particularly the amygdala and the brainstem, which is where all of our survival functions are located, both evolutionarily and in utero, before we had a prefrontal cortex. And so from the evolution of humanity as well as fetal development, those primitive parts of the brain are developed first. And the prefrontal cortex, which is where our language center, our rational thought, our decision-making, all of that is the last part of the brain to develop, both over the course of evolution and in the human body as it is right now in 2023. And so our survival instinct is there before anything else, including our ability to say, pause, take a deep breath. I want to respond to this. And so you had mentioned before the muscle memory. I often will tell folks that I'm coaching, do breathing exercises, practice that diaphragmatic breathing so that you can build that muscle memory, because when you need it, when you're activated, when your nervous system is activated and you're in that reaction phase, it's really hard to get in touch with your rational thought, to remember I have clients all the time. They're like, I know that Courtney told me to do something. Now I can't remember what it is. And it's because our rational brain gets turned off when our fight or flight response center gets turned on. And so we have to have some sort of muscle memory that's going to take us to that place to be able to kind of get back in our body, get back in the present moment, be thoughtful, be mindful, and respond. It's not something that's super easy to do. It's simple, right? Framework is very simple. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's true. This sounds so easy.
Right.
All you have to do is just wait 10 seconds and then you can respond.
Right.
It doesn't work quite that easily, does it?
No, because your nervous system is going to try to hijack everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love it. And I think it's such a good message that the areas that I currently am working on being more mindful is eating. One of the things that I have made a habit is unconsciously consuming food. I'm tired. I don't want to think. I just want to eat my dinner in front of the TV. Nobody talk to me. And you become very unconscious to what nutrition's going in your body. And I've been working with a health coach and really diving into more of the know what you're eating. And if you are triggered, analyzing the trigger before you respond, because sometimes I don't know, why am I feeling like I need something sweet right now? And I really have to take that mindfulness and go, what has happened in the last little bit? What is going on? What is the thing that my body is really craving? Because sometimes it's a learned response. Oh, my mom always fed me ice cream, so I want ice cream. So where is that balance? And so it's like, this is just one teeny tiny area that mindfulness can benefit people. And it's just paying attention, being aware, allowing your thoughts to process. and holding on until you have a good response for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want people thinking, oh, well, I'm counting to 10 so I don't lash out at this person angrily. Yeah, but that's not why we do it. It's
Right.
to calm the anger.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the anger is justified in that moment, but you still want that response to be thoughtful.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any more about mindfulness that you want to share with us before we close out?
I would just say, do it.
Do it
if it's
now.
Imperfect. Yeah. Like if, I think that we get so caught up in the shoulds. I should sit for 45 minutes every single day. That's what meditation looks like on TV. And I would say, ditch that. Can you do 2 minutes? Can you do 5 minutes? Can you take 3 deep breaths at transition points in your day before you get out of your car, before you walk into your house, before you go to bed? Can you just make mindful moments if that's what you have available to you? Don't let some idealized construct of what meditation should look like be the reason that you don't do it. Because even a little bit is going to be tremendously beneficial. And then allow what you learn in that seated practice to translate into your life writ large so that you can apply those lessons in really meaningful ways. And then the last thing I would say is within sort of an area that I think really bridges the gap between well-being practices and mindfulness are the ideas of curiosity and gratitude. So one of the principles in Buddhist meditation, which is my training is in Vipassana meditation, is this idea of beginner's mind, which is, can you allow yourself, my colloquial definition is, can you allow yourself to suck at something?
Yes.
And ask questions about it, right? We don't have to know. We go through our lives feeling that we should know. We should know all the time. And beginner's mind is, can you just approach this with some curiosity, with questioning, and with just a release of, it's okay if it doesn't go perfectly because I'm brand new at it. And then on the flip side of that is this idea of gratitude. The more that we are in tune with the things that are actually happening in our lives, the more we can cultivate a sense of awe and wonder and gladness of what we're encountering. And that to me is all embedded in gratitude. And if there's one practice I've engaged with over the course of my life that I think has been life-changing to the point of being life-saving, it would be gratitude practice. And that to me is something that has the potential to naturally evolve out of a mindfulness practice because you're paying attention. You're starting to notice all of the riches that are naturally occurring.
Yes. I love that. Notice the riches, because I think so often we focus on the lack. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that my gratitude practice has given me is I have abundance. There is so much to be thankful for and so much to be appreciative of, way more than the things that I don't really care for, because you are looking at those. So, we talked, this has been a nice, fun conversation. We've learned about the difference between meditation and mindfulness. And to me, meditation's going to the gym. Mindfulness is the strong muscles that you have after going to the gym.
Yes.
I now can do things because I've worked on that ability. So the meditation is learning how to control our mind in a mindful way. And mindfulness is letting our mind and right now be what's important and not what should have had or what could have had or what might have had or I wished it away. It's allowing life to be just what it is and recognizing what it's doing for you. And so I love that approach that, because I don't think I'd ever sit down and separated the two. I knew that my mindful practice was not the same as my meditation practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't really thought about what the difference was. So I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. And just your overall whole philosophy of the richness of life, the practices that feed you instead of suck the energy out.
That's right.
That count to 10. We're saying 10 just because that's the normal saying, but count whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So I really think that you have just given our listener just amazing, profound information that's going to help them balance their life and bring balance to how not only respond, but knowing when to hold the reaction. Just that I'm recognizing it. I see it. And, when you're in your meditation practice and something stupid happens, that is the thing that is training you to recover when you're not. Be grateful for the interruptions during your mindfulness and your meditation practice. Be grateful for the things that distract you, because you coming back to center is what this is all about. And the more you practice, the faster to center you can be. I love it. Listener, all of the information about how to get a hold of Courtney, about her podcast, her social media, they're in the show notes for you right now to go look her up and take advantage of her amazing knowledge. Courtney and I are not medical or mental professionals. We are here for entertainment purposes. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss a next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.